All right, what I'm about to do here, it has a great visual payoff. So I say this sort of as a public service, right? If right now you are doing the dishes and listening to me and not watching, just come over here to the TV, just watch this for just a second because it has a visual payoff that you need to see. All right, the context here is the state of Alaska. The state of Alaska, the most important thing about it for this purpose, the state of Alaska is freaking enormous. The state capital in Alaska is marked there in red. It's way down there in the southeast corner of the state. I mean, it's still opposite northern Canada. It's still really far up there. But as Alaska goes, Juneau is way down there. The largest city in Alaska is Anchorage, which is quite a bit northwest of Juneau. It's sort of south-central Alaska. If you want to go way up there, the biggest city in interior Alaska, way up north from Anchorage, is Fairbanks. But if Fairbanks isn't enough for you, there's Fairbanks. If Fairbanks isn't extreme enough for you, if you really want to go to the very tip top, if you want to go to the end of the road and beyond, and America's great northern frontier, if you keep going, and then you keep going further than that, and then you keep getting further than that, you will eventually get to a place that they named in such a way as to try to convince you to not go there. The name of the place is Dead Horse. Dead Horse, Alaska, in Prudhoe Bay. And there is a Rachel Maddow Show viewer named Dara who lives in Dead Horse, who lives up there in Prudhoe Bay. And she sent us this picture. She says, as the only store in town, the Prudhoe Bay General Store is the backdrop for most anyone who has been through Dead Horse. Prudhoe Bay is a large oil field where big oil companies send people to work for weeks at a time at a work camp. Working there can mean big money for those workers, and it's their livelihood. It's safe to say they support the oil industry. Dara went on to explain in this letter that she wrote us that not only in Prudhoe Bay, but Alaska generally, she doesn't know too many liberals, right? She says the main news channel everybody's watching up there is Fox. Hello. But she said she headed to the Prudhoe Bay General Store the other day. She needed to get some supplies. She went to the store. And when she got there, she got a very pleasant liberal surprise. We have to zoom in to see the pleasant surprise. Can we zoom in? What's that? Ta-da! Bernie Sanders for president. Dara wrote to us, quote, Bernie appeared in the most unexpected of places, and it made my day. Bernie Sanders, the independent socialist from Vermont, making his mark in Dead Horse at the end of the Dalton Highway in the northernmost reaches of Oil Town, Red State, Alaska. Send it to Rachel.com is the website if you want to send us stuff. People first started realizing that something special, something unexpected was going on with the Bernie Sanders campaign when he turned out really unusually large crowds in liberal strongholds like Madison, Wisconsin. This was the Madison rally. He turned out 11,000 people. In Denver, Colorado, he turned out between 5,000 and 6,000 people. They had to do a big overflow room. In Portland, Maine, he turned out 8,000 people. They had to move the venue in Portland, Maine from a nice little waterfront spot to the hockey arena in town. When Bernie Sanders announced his presidential run in Burlington, Vermont, there were 5,000 people there for his announcement. And yeah, that's, 5,000 people is a lot of people anywhere. No other candidate, Democrat or Republican, has turned out a crowd that size even once this year. But 5,000, consider this. That town that Bernie announced in only has a population of 40,000 people. And 5,000 of them came out to see him announce. That's a significant chunk of that whole city. So people first started realizing something was going on with his candidacy, with these unusually large crowds, outsized crowds compared to the rest of the presidential field in either party, people that were turning out to see Bernie in liberal strongholds. But then that script got flipped on its head because Bernie Sanders wasn't just going to liberal strongholds. He went to, let's say, Phoenix, Arizona. Red State, Phoenix, Arizona. Bernie Sanders turned out 11,000 people to see him in conservative Phoenix, Arizona. He then went to Houston, Texas, and 5,000 people turned out to see him in Houston. And then he went to Dallas, Texas, and another 8,000 people turned out to see him in Dallas. And nobody's ever going to call Dallas, Texas a liberal stronghold, right? But now Bernie Sanders has iced that cake because last night Bernie Sanders went to Louisiana. He went to the Pontchartrain Center in Kenner, Louisiana, and nobody knew whether he'd be able to turn out another one of his Bernie-sized giant crowds in the Deep South, right? Not just a deep red state, but in the deepest Deep South. But hours before Bernie Sanders was due to speak in Louisiana, people started lining up. By the time he was ready to start speaking, in this state where President Obama lost to Mitt Romney by 18 points, by the time he was ready to start speaking, there were somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 people turned out in Louisiana to see this liberal 73-year-old independent socialist from Vermont. And they were there to cheer their guts out for him.
I don't know that we can squeeze any more people in here. Thank you so much for coming out. Some people told me that Louisiana was a conservative state. Guess not. Which leads me to why I am here in Louisiana tonight. And I'll tell you why. Let me begin by just telling you that I think my colleagues in the Democratic Party have made a very, very serious mistake. And that is they have kind of written off half of America, including Louisiana. And I'm here to tell you that the time is now for us to fight in 50 states in the country.
Bernie Sanders building a one-man 50-state strategy for the Democratic Party, appearing before a huge crowd, somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 people this weekend in deep red state Louisiana. You know, he's doing this deliberately. This is not like he's just sort of following his nose and going places that he's interested in appearing at. Before he even declared formally that he was running, Senator Sanders did events in South Carolina, in Alabama, in Mississippi, North Carolina, and Georgia. Just in the last 2 weeks, he has been to Arizona and Texas and now Louisiana. He is running, I mean, it's not a red state campaign specifically. He's running an all-state campaign. And it is one thing to think about that as a waste of time for Democratic candidates, since those states as a whole will never go for a Democratic candidate in a general election except in extreme circumstances. But, you know, before you get to the general election, you do have to win the nomination. And even red states hold Democratic primaries. And whether or not these red state appearances, where he is turning out thousands and thousands and thousands of people to come see him, whether or not these huge appearances in the red states help him compete in the primaries in those states when it comes time for Democratic primaries, whether or not he wins those states ultimately, what Bernie Sanders is doing and the way he is campaigning is blowing everybody's minds. That he's turning out that many people anywhere in the country to hear and to cheer for that kind of an unapologetic liberal message, right? The Beltway is not used to this sort of thing. There's that many liberals that can fill a room anywhere, let alone in a red state? Yes, there are. But, you know, if that room he was speaking in there in Louisiana looked at all familiar to you, if that sort of camera angle and that look there, if that's tingling your politics spidey sense somehow, does that seem a little familiar? It's because that is the same building. That's the same Pontchartrain Center which Bernie Sanders stuffed 5,000 cheering liberals into in Louisiana last night. That is the same building, the same place where Bobby Jindal, governor of Louisiana, held his presidential announcement a few weeks ago. Except when Bobby Jindal was there, he was only able to turn out 1,000 people, whereas Bernie Sanders turned out a crowd somewhere between 4 and 5 times that size. Did I mention that he's from Vermont? The Bernie Sanders phenomenon is totally befuddling to all mainstream political pundit expectations. Totally befuddling to the Beltway press. And I firmly believe that anything that foils the common wisdom, you know, that spectacularly, it has to be good for us as a country, right? Shake us up a little bit. Whatever caused us to come up with a common wisdom here needs to be changed because the common wisdom is wrong. And the Bernie Sanders phenomenon is not a flash in the pan. This has been going on for a couple of months now. The latest NBC Marist polling from the early states, which came out this weekend, shows that Hillary Clinton does still have a very big lead over Bernie Sanders in Iowa. But in New Hampshire, look, Bernie Sanders is now polling within 7 points of Hillary Clinton. It is the unlikeliest turn of events, right? Liberals are not only alive, they are making themselves known in giant numbers in unexpected places. And it's confusing the heck out of everyone in politics. Very exciting. Common wisdom basically has no idea anymore.